Hey everybody, welcome to Inside Quest. We're the hyperbaric chamber for your mind. Our goal is to bring on amazing people who can help you learn to perform under pressure. And if you're looking for a way to turn stress management into a competitive advantage, there's no better guest than the man joining us today. He's a mathematician and computer scientist who has gained widespread acclaim for his unique style of leadership training, which applies scientific rigor to the otherwise squishy field of emotional intelligence. A man who openly struggled early in his career as a leader, his advice has the authentic ring of someone who has learned from first-hand experience. Every word he speaks cuts straight to the heart of the issue and lands with the weight that only hard-won knowledge carries. During his time as vice president of a software company, he used the techniques that he now teaches to take his former company from top 10 contender to number one in their industry, driving revenues from $2 million a year to $75 million a year in short order. Gaining attention for his ability to deliver results and empower other leaders, he is now the CEO of the international research and training firm, the Institute for Health and Human Potential. The disciplined way that he and his team at IHHP approach the science of emotion has helped him catapult the firm to its position as one of Profit Magazine's 100 fastest growing companies. His courses on performing under pressure and his evidence-based lessons for learning to control one's own emotions have made him the leadership expert of choice for some of the world's largest companies, including Coca-Cola, Intel, Marriott, NASA, Goldman Sachs, and multiple branches of the U.S. military. He was a contributor to the New York Times and Amazon best-selling book, Performing Under Pressure, and his powerful insights into what drives human behavior have also made him a much sought-after lecturer. Please help me in welcoming the man who has been called insightful, inspirational, practical, and deeply passionate. The award-winning speaker who is changing the world's relationship to pressure and helping us all push the limits of our own potential. Bill Benjamin. Welcome to the show, man.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
I'm a huge believer that probably the most important thing that anybody could do to get the kind of grand success that they want in their life is learn to control their own emotions. So I'm needlessly to say very excited to have you here. What do you think that key thing is? What's the beginning step for somebody that wants to get control of their emotions?
Yeah, it's a great question. Emotional intelligence, performing under pressure, it starts with self-awareness. Am I aware of how I'm responding and reacting under pressure? Am I aware of how I'm showing up for people? And that was my early struggle. The challenge for me was I wasn't a very good leader. Yeah, and so the hard lesson for me is it wasn't going to be about getting smarter, like getting better as a leader, being able to manage pressure, manage emotions. So I had to learn and gain the awareness that first of all that mattered. How I was managing pressure, how I was managing emotions, and where I was doing well and where I wasn't doing as well. So it's that awareness that's the key.
So how do you teach people that? Because I'm totally with you, and I agree. And if I were going to say that I have a superpower, it is self-awareness.
Yeah.
But I didn't knowingly cultivate it. I won't say that I didn't cultivate it, but I wasn't doing it on purpose, at least not in the beginning.
Yeah.
So how do we help people get that self-awareness?
Yeah. I mean, for me, and this is the way I approach it, because I'm more logical and analytical, it was starting to understand the brain and how my brain responds.
You and me both.
Yeah, because I think what happens is people recognize, well, sometimes when I'm under pressure, I'm not always my most skillful, and they think, oh, well, they're bad, or that's just who they are and they're stuck. You had Carol Dweck, who you interviewed, who talks about the fixed versus growth mindset. A lot of people have that fixed mindset, well, I guess I'm just stuck with the way I am. Where if you can explain to people how their brain works and how they can then use that knowledge to change it, they start to recognize, okay, wow, I can be different. I'm not stuck with the way that I am. So we start there.
So what are some fundamental things? And by the way, I could not agree more. I wish that I had put it directly together like that before, so I can feel really smart right now. But I'm totally with you on that. So how do we take a couple key elements that are the entryway to the most useful things that you should know about your brain? What are those?
Yeah, I'd say there's two real key things maybe three, that have really helped me. One is in our emotional intelligence work, is understanding that our emotional brain is different from our cognitive brain. Our emotional brain, and there's a small almond-sized part of the brain called the amygdala, handles our fight or flight responses. that part of our brain operates up to 100 times faster than our IQ or our cognitive brain. So when something happens, if we're feeling frustrated, if we get an email that we don't like, or somebody says something, that emotional system is going to respond first. And it actually causes the release of chemicals that cascade in our body. Blood moves to the major muscle groups, our heart rate increases, we're ready for fight or flight. That emotional part of our system will also release chemicals into our brain that reduces our ability to think clearly, to think complex thoughts, which is typically at the exact moment when we actually want to be able to think our clearest, use our best cognitive ability. So understanding that we all have this emotional system that reacts, responds, and sometimes moves us to default behaviors that are not skillful is a really key learning.
Okay, so the amygdala is powerful for sure. Obviously, stimulus is, I think, always run through the amygdala, right? To process, is this, what should I be doing with this? So assuming that that's true, now you're going to fall into a scale of degrees, right? And I think that it would be relatively easy to train somebody to recognize when you've really triggered severe anxiety or you're headed towards a panic attack or completely shutting down or whatever, but there's all these shades backing up where they can start triggering non-useful behaviors, right? Such as a bite in their personality because they're feeling challenged and now they use a dominant stance or whatever the case may be to try to back you off that they may not be aware that they're doing.
Right.
Do you guys focus on trying to sort of get them earlier in the stage so it doesn't have to be this catastrophic spike of anxiety before they catch it?
Yeah, very, very, very good. Absolutely. When the amygdala triggers, releases these chemicals, and reduce our ability to think complex thoughts, it's called an amygdala hijack. Dan Goleman wrote the book Emotional Intelligence over 20 years ago and coined that term. And there's degrees though, as you said, there's the, somebody's immediately getting angry or we're literally having to lift, the bus off the baby. But what we see more, particularly in business and in the organizations that we work with, are those lower degree hijacks. Like you said, somebody starts to challenge us and suddenly we're backing off. We're maybe not stepping in where we know we should, or we're not articulating our ideas well. So absolutely the idea is, can I catch that, recognize it, and then, by the way, once I've recognized that awareness, can I then put some strategies into place? Can I then do some things? And the good news is you can. You're not stuck with those default behaviors. You can start to learn strategies to react differently and show up differently.
So what are some of those strategies? Because if people could break themselves out of it, that would be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, in the book, the second section, we talk about 22 pressure solutions. And so, there's a whole bunch there. Some of the ones that I find the most practical is from a term we call the SOS. So in our training program, we teach this. S is stop. Because in that moment, the amygdala, the emotional system, it's acting like I'm fighting tigers. And so we have this need to respond. And so in that moment, if we can disconnect from the trigger, take that pause, drink a glass of water, open our palms, because our palms will start to curl. Maybe not into a full fist, but our palms, open our palms. So there's a number of things we can do to kind of pause in that moment. The O is oxygenate. So the intake of a large amount of oxygen, a deep conscious breath, actually carbonizes your blood and minimizes the impact of the chemicals, starts to help the chemicals recede from the brain. And then the third part is seek information about what will best serve me.
That's actually really powerful. How much do you guys get into the fundamentals of breathing, for instance, which is, it opens up a whole new world, right? So we come on to that, it's very easy just to blow past, but we could do a doctoral thesis on breathing, breath control, what happens.
Meditation, mindfulness.
How much do you guys go into that? How much do you use it personally? What do you think?
So in the Performing Under Pressure book, we absolutely talk about meditation, and in the training, the practice of mindfulness. Because in order to be more aware of how our thoughts are then affecting our body and our performance, we have to be mindful of our thinking. And so absolutely in the training program, I've done this training program with US Marines, with farmers, with folks from Marriott and some of the others you've mentioned.
Olympic athletes
Olympic athletes.
Right?
We literally sit and we teach them how to be mindful. And at first, a lot of them think, oh my gosh, this is some sort of thing that only yoga instructors and tree huggers do. But when I explain to them that, well, actually, I have degrees in mathematics, computer science, and I don't go for the soft and squishy stuff, but I've learned the brain science behind it, and I've learned, not only how it can help us be more effective, but the health benefits of mindfulness and breathing. So it is something we teach. And we actually used to have it in our program about 15 years ago, and it freaked people out too much.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, we would be with business executives. We would be, right message too early. Now, with all the research that's come out, and a lot of great authors and scholars have seen that, have shared the health benefits, people are much more open to it now.
That's really funny. And as somebody who was super weirded out by meditation and all that, as soon as I started doing it, and you feel the physical changes really rapidly.
Yes.
It's not like it takes 6 weeks of doing this stuff. Like you're gonna feel after like 4 breaths, right? Like you're there and you're feeling that benefit. So once I started doing it, I was like, remind me why I pushed back on this for so long. It's like, this is incredibly powerful. And one of the things that I find so interesting about your work, and I hope everybody at home paying attention, you guys here, is he's already mentioned physicality like 5 times, right? And there's these incredible studies about how if you ask somebody to rate their happiness, they'll rate it lower than if you make them hold a pencil in their teeth, which sort of forces them into a fake smile. And merely that physicality of forcing yourself into a fake smile actually makes you feel happier. It is so crazy and so powerful. If you're not doing it for every emotion you want to cultivate, you are making a mistake. So people used to ask me, like, do you meditate? And I was like, I sort of meditate, because I knew what people were envisioning was... Right?
Right, exactly.
Which I actually do now and think it's really fucking powerful, but I hadn't gotten there yet.
Right.
And at the time I said, no, what I do is what I call power meditation. And in power meditation, I'm trying to cultivate the chemical cascade that I have when I feel my most powerful, right?
Yeah.
When I feel dominant, when I feel aggressive, when I feel calm and assured. And getting to that place, you don't sit like this, right? And try to do it. It's, there's certain things. You sit in a certain way. You hold yourself.
Feet flat on the ground.
I may force myself to laugh out loud. All things people here tease me for. Like if I really need to get into a headspace, I will laugh out loud. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because instantly, boom, you go into this other place. The chemicals that kick off in your brain just because you're laughing out loud, even though it's fake, it starts to become real.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're saying about the physicality, because one of the things we talk about in the book is confidence. Confidence is so important when you're influencing, when you're presenting an idea, when you're parenting. It doesn't matter what it is. And I don't know if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy's work from Harvard. Okay, you want to have
name.
Okay, you want to have her on to interview her. She's fantastic. She's got one of the most watched TED Talks.
Okay.
So go have a look at it. And she has done research looking at the correlation between our body posture and confidence that's triggered by a balance of testosterone and cortisol in our brain. So they've literally done experiments where they have people take a cheek swab. So they measure their testosterone and cortisol levels. And testosterone is often really misunderstood. We're not talking about the male aggression hormone. We're talking about testosterone that gives us confidence, allows us to take meaningful risks. Then, of course, cortisol is our stress hormone. And in these studies, what they would do is they would have groups who would be in what she would call an open and expansive or power pose. So sitting like you are. Legs crossed.
Right.
If you're standing, she talks about sort of the Wonder Woman or the Michael Phelps pose.
Yeah.
Versus being closed and contracted, making yourself small, taking up less space, being on your phone. And what they found was that people who were in those open, expansive positions, their testosterone levels would go up, their good testosterone, their cortisol levels would go down. The people in the closed and contracted positions, the reverse would happen. So this used to happen to me because I speak a lot. And a lot of times I'll be speaking and there'd be somebody in front of me. And it's one of these people who, it's death by PowerPoint, and I'm sitting in my chair and I'm getting smaller and smaller. And without realizing it, my cortisol's going up, my testosterone goes down, and then it's like, here comes Bill Benjamin. It takes me a few minutes to get my energy, versus now, I don't sit before a presentation in the green room, which is actually blue.
Yeah. We call it the blue room.
In your blue room, I was standing. I was making sure I was standing up straight to keep the cortisol down, to keep the testosterone up, so that I could come in and and it's natural confidence. It's a lot like you're biting the pencil. It's a life hack. It's a brain hack that actually allows you to fool your brain into feeling confident.
Yeah, it's so effective, and it's one of those things, like, if people followed me around for a day, the amount of stuff I do that's patently ridiculous from the outside, but it really works, right? So practice this stuff at home. Like, do it. You sit like this, see how you feel, see how it diminishes you. One thing that I do when I'm meditating is I go through an intentional change of physicality. So I start small, and as I start breathing and really breathing from my belly and expanding, there's a natural sense to do this, right? But as I do it, then I begin to exaggerate it, so that by the time I'm about to get up from, if I'm doing it to enhance my power, I'm sitting like this, I've really got this, I'm leaning forward like I'm ready to get up. And just in transforming my physicality, in walking myself through that dynamic change, I feel differently in my brain. It's utterly fascinating. The question to me, and I guess ultimately the answer is irrelevant, but which started which, right? Like, you can definitely, if you're feeling off, if you feel weak, afraid, your physicality will shrink down for sure. But if you then take on a more confident pose, then it will actually make you feel more confident. It goes back and forth.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg, but Amy Cuddy talks about faking it till you make it.
Right.
So in other words, you might be going in a situation where you're not feeling that confident. You haven't had an experience in that before. So if you do this, you're going to get less confident. Whereas if you power pose, it will actually, just like the biting, makes you feel a little happier. It'll give you that little bit of sense of confidence, which then is a self-fulfilling prophecy, so that you step in and you feel more confident. Then it starts to go well. Right. So we absolutely say, in any kind of pressure moment, particularly where you're going to be socially judged, to practice, make sure you're open and expansive. A job interview, a big presentation, a difficult conversation with someone. Make sure that you aren't sitting in someone's lobby like this. Make sure you're open and expansive beforehand.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about you, by the way, is you put this stuff into practice. I mean, you actually really use this stuff. Like, I love that about you.
Bill, I can't be any more honest than to say, by nature, I'm weak, lazy, and not that bright. Truly. Now, what do you call it, threshold? Like, there's certain things that are threshold things. So like IQ is a threshold thing. Once you cross a certain threshold, you're fine. So I'm above that threshold, right? But from that, everything else is me going, what do you know? Oh, do this? Cool, I'm going to try that. Let's see what works.
Right.
And it's just it goes back to what you're saying about Carol Dweck and a fixed mindset, growth mindset. Once I abandoned a fixed mindset, which I had clung to for many, many years, but once I abandoned that, then it just became, how many new ideas can I encounter and then try?
Yeah.
And then see, oh, did this work? And if it didn't work, is somebody that I really respect that's getting a result that I want, do they keep using it? And that's how it was with me for meditation. Like, the more I researched people that I just was blown away by, the more consistently I heard meditate, 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 meditate. And it was finally Mark Devine, who was a guest on the show, that here he is, a Navy SEAL. He literally has killed people, is a trained killer. Like, no more badassery can be obtained than this man has obtained, right?
Yeah.
Like, he was I forget what they call me, but he was #1 in his Buds class, which it's already absurd if you graduate.
Yes.
To graduate first is like, that's just bonkers. So I just had all this sort of manly respect that you can have for somebody. And he was like, oh yeah, I meditate all the time. And I just thought, okay, I give. So I listened to the way that he does his boxed breathing, it's really, really powerful, and showed me a new layer to meditation. You and I were talking about Tony Robbins, using Tony's thing about gratitude. So I'll meditate, and then I go straight into gratitude after that, because I'm feeling so centered and just authentic. It's kind of a cheesy way to use that word right there, but that's actually how I feel. Like, there's no airs, there's nothing. I just feel grounded, centered, authentic, totally me. And in that moment, to really feel, not intellectually express, but really feel the things in my life that I'm grateful for. And the reason I started doing that was Tony kept saying, you can't be angry, sad, scared, whatever, if you're feeling grateful.
That's
if you're
right.
feeling grateful, right? Which is different than saying I'm grateful.
Yes, you have to feel it.
If you're feeling it. And that applies to a lot of other things. Like early in my marriage, when I was really young and just not great at what you talk about, being on the other side of the bridge, right? And looking back and trying to build that rapport with my wife, starting from her side.
You've been watching my videos, haven't you?
Oh,
nice.
Bill, read everything you've written, watched everything you put out there.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well worth it, by the way. So not knowing how to do that, we used to force each other when we were pissed, like when you're in one of those just irreconcilable differences, moments where you I want to get away from this. We'd force each other to laugh out loud. And
Smart.
You can't laugh out loud and be pissed. You literally can't do it. So you may try, but the absurdity of laughing when you're that pissed off is in and of itself funny, and it would just break the dynamic.
Yeah, I love what you said there about your marriage, because they did some really amazing work where they were able to determine with 94% accuracy, that is a ridiculous accuracy, what couples would be married and who would be divorced in 5 years, simply by watching them discuss something that was a conflict in their
Is this where he's talking about the 4 horsemen?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's the 4 horsemen, and it's really all about how they react to pressure.
Yeah, I remember reading that and him talking. So it's basically the 4 horsemen that signal the doom of your relationship. And he said the one thing they look for, the one that leads to this such degree of accuracy, is contempt. When you show contempt for somebody, like, it's over, right?
Yeah.
Once you allow yourself to get to that point where you will, in their face, express raw, naked contempt for them, it's done.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're aware, going back to your point, you could probably backtrack from that. But when people are doing it, they're not aware that they're doing it. They're not on the other side of the bridge, understanding how that's being perceived and the damage that that's doing. It's pretty hard to come back from that.
I mean, the other thing he talks about too, because we're all not perfect and we all have conflict, is the idea of repair attempts. Does someone make an attempt to say, you know what, I'm sorry I reacted that way, or gosh, that was tough, or even just something not even related to it.
Right.
Like, hey, do you want to watch the show tonight?
Right.
Some sort of attempt to reconnect that actually is something that really can help in those relationships. So yeah, I mean, I love the degree to which you have a growth mindset, and a great example of that is we did a research study of 12,000 people for the book, and we looked at the top 10%, compared them to the rest.
Yes.
And we found out that those top 10%, they don't have some innate ability that the rest of us don't have. They just do a lot of the small things really well, and one of them was the ability to receive criticism and feedback without becoming defensive.
Yes.
And you think, well, these are top 10% performers, why do they need feedback? Well, that's how they got there. They're aggressive learners. They're growth mindset people, and that's how they stay at the top.
Yeah, I want to talk about triggers. You talk about triggers a lot, and this, what you're saying right now to me is like, you want to talk secrets to the universe? When somebody can use the trigger of getting criticism that feels shitty, they're not liking where this is headed, they're shutting down.
Yep.
And then they realize that very feeling of shutting down, or maybe they get aggressive. That very feeling of getting aggressive or shutting down.
Yeah, fight or flight.
Right?
That's the fight or flight, yep.
Absolutely. Is the trigger to a more constructive behavior. So, hey, when I feel this, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to remember to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And if X, Y, Z is take a deep breath, stop, drink, whatever, so that you recenter yourself. Or what I've used is that becomes a trigger to tell myself the story of who I am. And the story of who I am is I'm not smart, I am a learner. I'm not an expert, I'm interested in growing. And whoa, this person is showing me a deficit. Well, for a learner, that's fantastic, right? Awesome. I've gotten this far in my life without knowing what you're about to tell me. Like, that's incredible. And I literally tell myself that story. You're the learner, you're the learner, you're the learner. And when you find yourself in a situation where you want to react in what will, for sure, be a detrimental way, and you can use that very thing as a trigger to engage then in a positive behavior, and I'll define positive as it moves you towards your goals, it can be super empowering.
Yeah. Oh, and I love what you just described is actually one of the core teachings from the performing under pressure work, which is the idea of how we appraise something has a huge impact on our ability to deal with it. So, for example, we have a technique called crisis versus opportunity. Because you were asking me about some of the brain science. So the amygdala was the first. This is the second piece of brain science that I find so valuable. Is we're all wired when something happens. in a pressure moment to view it as a crisis. So I'm coming on this television show. There are thoughts going through my mind like, what if Tom doesn't like me? What if I'm terrible? Et cetera. And when that happens, when we see the negative outcomes and view it as a crisis, noradrenaline is released in our system, which actually causes constriction of our blood vessels. So we all have blood vessels running through our body, and we need oxygen to get to our muscles and our brain. Well, if we're seeing it as a crisis, the blood vessels constrict. We don't get as much oxygen to our body, and we don't get enough oxygen to our brain, which elicits fears of failure. We have more narrow-minded thinking. We lose access to short-term memory, so we can't be our best. If we can shift and see it as more, wow, this is an opportunity, so I'm getting feedback. Oh, it's a crisis, the person doesn't like me, I'm bad. Versus, as you just identified, well, this is an opportunity to grow. When we go with that mindset, then suddenly the opposite happens. Adrenaline is released, our blood vessels dilate, more oxygen is getting to our body and our brain, and now we're able to step in more effectively and use some of our best cognitive tools. If we're in some sort of physical, such as sports or something, we get the oxygen to our bodies that we need, but particularly in our brain.
Do you find that walking yourself through or even visualizing what's happening to you biologically helps you get control of it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Like, I know what you're saying. I'm literally sitting here visualizing,
right.
My blood vessels dilating, and again, it just demonstrates the degree to which your cognitive thoughts affect your physiology. So, you can think about your blood vessels dilating, and your blood vessels start to dilate. I mean, there's so much power in our brain to affect our physiology, and then in reverse. Right? Then when the blood vessels are dilating, now more oxygen is getting back to my brain, now my brain's getting better. So there's this incredible interplay between our brain and our physiology.
In the early days for me, when I was really trying to train myself to do this stuff automatically, and so I come from the Bruce Lee school of thought, don't think, kick, just kick. And you have to kick and practice kicking so many times that you get to the point where it's an automatic response. So I really had to walk myself through these things over and over and over. And I used visualizations of the amygdala, right? I would think about what the amygdala looks like. Amygdala, by the way, is Greek for almond. So I knew it looked like an almond. And you know what I mean? And I would just start thinking about that. And what does it look like when an impulse runs through that? Or my blood vessels are constricting. Or the one that I used to think about a lot, the blood is literally leaving my prefrontal cortex, which is leaving me without the ability for higher level cognition. That's really not helpful.
Right.
So, and just in going through and understanding that this stuff was a biological function allowed me to separate myself, my sense of self, I should say, from the physicality. And in doing that, I could, this was no longer a commentary on me and who I am and my worth as a person. It was a commentary on facts of biology.
Right.
And okay, cool. Well, if I know the facts of biology, then it's a question of, are there, counter forces that you can apply to that? And we've sort of already talked about that, but that was really, really helpful for me in the early days to just think about that over and over and over and over and over so that I could, because my goal was to, let's say that if something knocked me off emotional balance, when I was in my mid-20s. And it took me, there were some things that would piss me off and it would linger for like 3 days.
Yeah.
Right, so how do I take the 3 days down to a day, down to 3 hours, down to an hour, down to a minute, down to 3 seconds, right? And then so over time working it, my goal was to get it to the point where people didn't see it register on my face, even in a micro expression, right? That was my goal. So that you're sort of training it backwards and backwards and backwards, always moving the trigger closer and closer and closer. Like at first it was, you've just been pissed off for 3 days and that's pretty stupid.
Right.
Hey, that's trigger number one, right? And then you just keep working it back until you start to recognize, like when you have anxiety, I feel it in my stomach first. It's actually not in my head. I feel this little, what people would call butterflies in my stomach, but it's not the nice butterflies, like when you find somebody attractive, it's like oh God, here we go, I'm about to get into something that's very uncomfortable. And I began to learn to detect that, because usually that would come before the real confrontation. Because you would pick up on some cue that this is about to become one of the hard conversations. I forget the name that you guys
difficult conversation.
You've got daily, difficult, and
courageous conversations.
There we go.
Nice.
So,
well done.
Well, I failed you on the third bill. I will punish myself relentlessly later for that, I promise you. But yeah, so this is about to either be difficult or a full-blown courageous conversation, but I feel that really early thing, and now I've been training to do something with that. And one thing that I always tell people, stop looking at yourself through the lens of a moment, right? So in any one conversation, you might fuck it up. You felt the twinge, you forgot what it meant, you let yourself get out of hand, you find yourself screaming at your boss, and that didn't end well, right? But rather than beat yourself up for that, then look at everything as disciplined practice and view yourself through the lens of a lifetime, right? Like, hey, how many times can I get it right? So that it's not all absolute in one moment. Like, I just want to get better, I want to get faster, whatever. So let's in the Noah Kagan episode, I had a chance where I just kept tripping over my words and then forgetting what I was going to say. And I was like, what is happening? It was very surreal. You know when you're like, oh, I remember what I was going to say. I forgot again. Right. It was one of those moments. Like, it was very weird.
No, I never had that happen.
No?
No, yes, I have.
My friend.
Yeah.
And it just kept happening. So I was like, okay, I can at this moment now just start punishing myself in my own internal dialogue about how dumb I am and all that. Or I can say, all of life is but disciplined practice. Here's my chance now to reframe this and claw my way back out of a deficit, right? Because when I showed up, I thought this was just a show about me trying to improve my interviewing skills. But now I realize this is a show about me climbing from a deficit where I'd made the audience super uncomfortable, because everyone wants you to win, right? And in that moment, oh God, they feel so uneasy for you.
Right.
So I need to get them back to neutral and then hopefully take them where we're all just sort of caught up in the emotion again. And that reframe of, wait, this isn't a performance, this is practice, lowers the pressure and allows people to perform better.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there that I love that you just said. The first one is the idea that our physicality, when we're under pressure, we feel it there first. And that brings us all the way back to the beginning. That's the self-awareness. So for those in the audience that want to improve your self-awareness, become aware of where you feel it in your body. You said in your stomach. My hands will shake a little bit. So if I'm in a meeting and it's getting a little tense and I notice my hands shaking, okay, that's my awareness that, all right, now there's some stuff happening in my brain that's going to make me less skillful.
Right.
Some people feel it in their chest. I had a woman who said whenever she met with a really difficult person, her neck area would get really red. So of course, guess what she would wear every time she'd meet with the person? She'd wear a turtleneck. So she needed to work on her management skills, but she had the awareness at least. And so it's really, get that awareness of where do you feel it in your body, because your body is your early warning system. You went right into the visualization. So, if I'm in the moment, I want to put some things into practice, take my deep breath, my water, reframe my thinking. But if you have time, if you're preparing, it's a job interview, it's a sporting event, the emotional part of our brain, it doesn't differentiate between real and perceived.
Right.
So if you step on a snake and get bitten in the leg, and 6 months later you step on a hose, you're going to react the same. So if you can visualize yourself really being in that moment, the emotional part of your brain says, oh, it's real, it's happening. So if you can visualize it and then see yourself going to the behavior that you want to do, it actually starts to develop new neural pathways in your brain that say, okay, this is what I do in that moment. I don't immediately react. So the visualization is it's a bit more of an advanced technique that we teach, but it's very powerful.
What you just said is actually another visualization that I use, which is my brain rewiring itself, which is something that I think a lot about.
That's a good one.
And once I understood what is actually happening between the neurons and why it speeds up the connection between them, I could see all the times I'd created a problem for myself by associating one thing with another, right? To take your snake example, that now I have this just really intense connection, because not only was it I stepped on a snake and I got bit, every time I see something cylindrical and long, I remember the snake, right? And now that shape becomes a snake, and that shape now just becomes inextricably wired to that notion of being in danger, whatever. And you could, for somebody who obsesses over it like that, over and over and over and over, but you can also unwind that. So you can begin to associate whatever your trigger point is with something else.
And the emotional part of our brain, it doesn't cognate. It just reacts, and then you're on heightened alert. And then if that person does happen to walk into the room, now you're more likely to react unskillfully. So
God, I have to call attention to it. That unskillfully, that's so wisely chosen.
Okay.
Why did you choose it? It's so powerful. I've got to imagine you have a reason for saying unskillfully.
It separates it out from bad. It separates it out from I did something wrong. And we all have so much wiring and messaging around if I'm bad, if I did something wrong, versus no, there was a behavior that was not skillful. It also implies it can be fixed.
Yes.
If it's unskillful, that means, well, then there's a skillful part to it. Because one of the things we really teach again in our training, particularly if you're connecting with someone, is to separate the behavior from the person. Because what can happen in challenging relationships is the person themselves start to become the trigger, but it didn't start that way. Something happened under pressure. You guys, in that relationship, there was this sort of system of emotions that got to a point where now that person feels like the trigger, but it's actually not. It's the behavior. So to also look at it in ourselves, but also look at others and say, okay, that person's acting unskillfully when they interrupt me in front of a bunch of people, but I can separate that from the person. That helps me. It doesn't mean I accept someone interrupting me in front of others. Right. It just means when I go to deal with it, then I can deal with it more skillfully.
Right.
So yeah, it is a good word.
There's so much mojo in that. How much do you think about word choice? Because that's a super powerful example of how words matter, and all the recognition of cognitively what's happening around not only the word but the explanation that you just gave. How much importance do you place on that?
I mean, a lot, and I'm a professional speaker, so it means a lot, and in particular, the application for me is helping people learn. So, we all taking so much information, we get so many emails, and our families, and everything's going on. How do we help leave people with language and strategies that they can remember? Although, and you know this, what's actually more important is tone and the micro expressions, and so how you say something. So much of what's communicated is nonverbal, and that's the part where we need the awareness to be able to manage. As you said, you've really worked at it, right? When somebody starts giving me critical feedback, if I immediately get in defensive posture, but I say, oh gosh, thank you for the feedback, but I'm looking all defensive and I'm not sounding like I'm thankful, it doesn't really matter what my words are. And so it's both. It's a balance of the what we're saying and the how we're saying it.
Do you focus people on asking them what end result they want from their behavior? Is that part of your training?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you do that?
Because we're all goal driven. We're all tied to, we're all wired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And in a business setting, pleasure is being successful, having a good reputation, getting a promotion. And so, yes, we're all wired. So if we can tie the outcome of, well, here's going to be the positive benefit of changing the behavior to, okay, well, that's going to help me in this difficult relationship that's keeping me up at night. Or, wow, that's going to help me in this job interview. Or that's going to help me give this presentation that'll mean I'll be successful and might get a promotion or a bonus. Then absolutely people are much more likely then to want to do the work it takes to change their behavior.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and I was hoping that would be your answer, because that makes so much sense to me. And when I think about so obviously as the boss, you routinely run into conversations, they're hard for the other person, right?
Yes.
And one thing that I tell people, and honestly, I need to do a better job of figuring out from the other side of the bridge what this sounds like, but I'm trying to get to just a cold, hard reality, which is, I have no incentive for you to change your behavior other than that it's good for you, right? So I'm going to succeed with or without you. I say that, right? Now the reason I say that is not to be an affront to you. It's so that I'm not trying to manipulate you, right? This isn't a situation where I have some high degree of motivation to control your mind and to get you to do something that I want. Will it make you a better employee? Yes, but what does being a better employee mean? That you set a goal for yourself and you're able to accomplish it. And if you took this job assuming that you're here for the very reason that it's moving you towards your goals, our selfish desires are aligned. So even if I'm just doing it for my reasons, which I'm not, but even if I were, I'm trying to help you get what you say you want. Now, when people understand that it is designed to empower you to accomplish what you want to accomplish in the way you want to accomplish it. Like, for instance, I don't like going to the gym, but I really like six-pack abs, right? I'm just gonna keep it real with you. All right? So it's cool. It's cool. So I don't show up in the gym every day and think, I'm gonna do this many sets or whatever, because it's time and I could be reading. I'd much rather be reading. It's energy. That shit is tiring. So I think about what I'm trying to get, right? I think about strength. I think about power. Like, you're going to be able to lift a heavier weight if you do this. So I'm not thinking about the activity itself. I'm thinking about that compelling future, that thing that I want, that I'm willing to work for. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this makes sense. Because I think a lot of times when you're talking about emotion, you're talking about it in the workplace, you're talking about, hey, you need to go to the other side of the bridge and really look at this from that person's perspective. They're thinking, why the hell should I do that?
Right.
And the why the hell you should do that is, I'm making the base assumption that you're trying to move forward in your career because that's meaningful to you, right? And if that is meaningful to you, finding a way to work in harmony with other people is just powerful. So if you stop thinking about how much work and effort it's going to take for you to gain self-awareness, to chip away at these behaviors that are unskillful and get to a more skillful behavior, once you realize it's in service of your own goals, it is not in service of your boss, right? It is in service of you. And you either want that thing for yourself or you don't, and if you don't, just admit it and go be a monk, right? Or do something else.
I love it. It reminds me of, I was in a training program with a group of U.S. Army commanders, and they're there in their battle fatigues, and we were talking about this idea of, it's kind of servant leadership, it's, serving, and somebody put up their hand and said, yeah, that's all great, but what about the drill sergeant in basic training? I mean, his job is to ride your ass and to get you, and how does this apply? And I thought, I don't know. So I did what any good facilitator would do, is I asked the audience. And a fellow puts his hand up and he says, you know what? There's the drill sergeant who's there, and you can tell they're riding you because they want you to be the best soldier they can be. They care about your safety. They care about your unit. Then there's a drill sergeant who's doing it because it's all about the power, and it's all about them, and you can tell the difference. And the model, the metaphor for those that aren't familiar with it is, if we're trying to build a bridge, if there's someone that we're trying to influence or coach or parent, and there's some disagreement, there's some tension or pressure, most of us go to build the bridge from our side, to try to convince from our perspective, from our knowledge, our experience, our authority. But a lot of times there's a person on the other side of the bridge looking down thinking, I don't want to jump, I don't get where Bill's coming from, I don't know if he cares really about me. So the idea is, can we metaphorically get off our side of the bridge, walk over to the other side, and look at things from their perspective, from their side of the bridge. And that really helps demonstrate that we understand them, that they feel heard, they feel cared about and understood. So I love that you've kind of really connected with this concept of the bridge, because it's been really powerful for me. The other reason that a lot of times I think that people they think it's a bad idea to go to the other side of the bridge is they think it's weakness, or they think they have to give in. And Brene Brown's done a lot of great work around the area of vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's, do I actually have the courage to let go of everything I have going on and everything I think, and just take a moment and think, what's going on for that person?
Yeah, for sure. Take us a little deeper on that, because that's really powerful. So you've gone over to the other side, you've learned, and now empathy's triggered, right?
That's all empathy is, by the way. It's just letting go of all your stuff and going to the side of the bridge and thinking, what's going on for that person?
So how do you come back to the other side? And is it, I have the awareness to recognize that I actually do still have your best interest at heart?
Yes.
And so it doesn't make sense to stay where you are and we need to move here together, or is there something else?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the idea of leadership. It's not just getting people to like you and being nice and telling them what they want to hear. Great leaders, people who've had great mentors and coaches, they would hold you accountable. They would tell you when you let them down. They would give you feedback, but somehow they did it in a way where you felt like, they're doing it to help me. They're doing it because they care. I can listen and I can accept the feedback without getting defensive. So it's really all about recognizing that, you're doing that person a disservice if you're sort of stuck on their side of the bridge, not really saying what needs to be said.
Right.
Not perfectly, because we're all not perfect, but they've done it in a way where that person can hear, can listen. They're not feeling threatened. Their emotional system isn't going crazy, trying to protect them. They're feeling safe.
What do great leaders do when they come back to the other side of the bridge? They've got the empathy now. They really do understand where that person is, but they know they can't stay there. What are the great ones doing back on the other side to get them to move?
Yeah. I mean, it's the stuff I'm still working on as a leader.
Sure.
We talk about it as great leaders having a balance of heart and edge. It's that ability to, stand up for what we believe in. It's that ability to step in even where it's different, where it's uncomfortable. It's to take a risk. where there's tension and pressure, to kind of be able to wade into that in the skillful way, because we're all wired. We're wired to avoid things that feel uncomfortable, things that have tension and pressure associated with them, so this is a big thing in the performing under pressure work. Is we have to dive into that pressure. So it's that ability to wade into it even when it's difficult.
So you had a really interesting, not quite a stat, but you were saying in I think it was actually one of your blog articles, that a fascinating thing happens at the Olympics. You've worked with Olympic athletes. More records are set at the Olympics than leading up to the Olympics, and more worst performances happen at the Olympics than in the years leading up to the Olympics.
Yeah.
What's happening to the people who do well versus to the people who do poorly?
At that level, most of them, in the top 10, a few cases aside, they all actually have the capability to potentially medal. So the difference between 10th and 3rd is all about the mental training, what they're thinking about. And you would think, isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
You would think Olympic athletes are the most confident people in the world. They walk around thinking, gosh, I've trained. They're not. They're just like everyone else. They walk around the Olympic Village and think, wow, I didn't train. We're not as good as that team.
Right.
They look, and that's the stuff that starts happening. Suddenly their amygdala's triggering. They're losing their blood vessels are constricting, and suddenly they can't be at their best. So it's literally true that every 4 years at the Olympics there are more world records and personal best set. There are also more personal worst set than in the previous 4 years combined. And it's all the mental piece of it. Isn't that incredible?
That is incredible.
Yeah.
So what can we do to make sure that we fall into the percentage of people that have their best performance under pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything you're talking about here. It's that being an aggressive learner and having that growth mindset to say, okay, I'm not perfect at everything. There's some things I do really well and recognize those.
Right.
And then that self-awareness to say, okay, but sometimes, the last time I went into a job interview, as I think about it, I was taking the haphazard approach. I'm going to be very methodical about how I approach these pressure moments and the difficult situations in my life.
Right. Super powerful. All right, before we go, I want you to answer one final question for me.
Okay.
What is your definition of a life well lived?
A life well lived is, did I take care of my family? Did I impact anyone and help make their life better? That's for me a life well lived.
Oh man, and you've helped a lot of people do that today.
All right,
Bill, thank you so much. Absolutely incredible, guys. Please give it up.
Thank you.
Amazing.
This was fun.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I was very much geeking out like a kid in a candy store. This was a lot of fun, researching him and digging into his world, and just seeing that all the things that I had stumbled upon in my life, plus a whole plethora of even more elevated and amazing tactics and tools that I can immediately begin applying to my life. In terms of gaining control of my own emotions. If you've watched the show before, I really believe that the fundamental building block to success is the ability to control your own emotions. Until you have absolute control of your emotions, you cannot hope to effectively influence other people. You're maybe turning them off or pushing them away. You have no idea. But once you can get control of yourself, then anything becomes possible from there. And adopting the growth mindset, we've talked endlessly about that. Just a lot of amazing stuff here today. And if you take nothing away, begin to explore the physicality's impact on your mentality and vice versa. It has just so many back and forth triggers that you can use to empower yourself in your life and to get the things that you guys are going for. So watch this episode again. I think there were a ton of really cool things that Bill brought to the table. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. And Bill, tell us, where can we find you online?
Either at ihhp.com, that's the Institute for Health and Human Potential. A little bit easier to remember is pressurebook.com.
Guys, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe. This is a weekly show. Let us know what you're up to. Let us know things in your life that you've used, whether it's physicality, approaching the mentality, or vice versa. We want to hear about it. Also, if you want tickets to the show, we've got a growing group of people that are coming in here and being a part of this community. Let us know. Hit us up on InsideQuest.com. You can also follow us socially at InsideQuest. And then, of course, you can watch us on YouTube or as a podcast on Stitcher or iTunes. Inside Quest is the name. Until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Thank you, man. What a pleasure. That was a blast.